Amen. Now let's hear the word of the Lord from Hebrews 13, 1 through 7. Let brotherly love continue. Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares. Remember those who are in prison, as though in prison with them, and those who are mistreated, since you are also in the body. Let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled, for God will judge the sexually immoral and the adulterous. Keep your life free from love of money. Be content with what you have, for he has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we can confidently say, the Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me? Remember your leaders, those who spoke to you the word of God. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith. This is the word of the Lord.
Good morning, Sojourn. Peace be with you. Stay. Okay. Well, my name is Sam. I'm one of the pastors here. It's good to see you. This beautiful May Sunday. We have been working through the book of Hebrews thus far, and it's been about 17 years since we started the sermon series. But our mission here at Sojourn is to reach people with the gospel of Jesus, to build them up in the church, and to send them out into the world to make more disciples. And so we've been working through the book of Hebrews, and we've gotten to chapter 13, so this sermon and last week's sermon, they're going to sound real similar, and I think that's a good thing, because preachers, we think, the book of Hebrews is more than likely a sermon preached to a group of people. And we like to drive home that application, and so it's real practical at this point. And so one thing about application when it comes to preaching, really application with anything, there's multiple facets to it, but with application you got to know your audience, right? You can't, if I'm giving application and my application has to do with a bunch of married people, but I'm preaching at a singles conference, that doesn't quite make sense, right? So the application here needs to be really pointed towards the people that he's preaching to. And when I started to think about the people that he's preaching to, this is silly, but the movie Trolls came to mind. I have 3 little kids. I live in the world of cartoons and DreamWorks movies right now. And so there's a couple of groups of people that came to my mind when I thought about this audience that he's preaching to here in Hebrews that are from the movie Trolls. The first group is the Bergens. I got a picture. Yeah, there it is. It's a little blurry, but you get the idea. The Bergens were the villains of the movie. They thought that the only way that you could be happy in life is to eat a troll. Like a little troll, you just take it and eat it, and then you get happy. But there's a scene in the movie where there's really slow music playing, and they're just kind of moping around life. They're really sad. They're downtrodden. They've just kind of given up because the trolls escaped their land, and so they have no trolls to eat. They just have no joy. All the joy's been sapped out of their life because this expectation of being able to eat a troll has escaped them. So that's the Bergens. The other group of people that came to mind was Branch. Branch, he's actually a troll if you can't tell, but he's unlike all the other trolls. So trolls are typically very bright, colorful. They sing and dance and hug and sing and dance and hug, like that's just their life. And but Branch, because of some trauma that he had from his past, that eventually I won't give it away, but the movie eventually says what happened to him. He's got some trauma, but because of that, Branch he's not bright and colorful, but he's really gray. He feels really unsafe. He's very lonely, lives by himself in a kind of a doomsday shelter. He's really untrusting of other people. In his personality, he's very negative, and he's quite cynical as well. And also, he's very sarcastic. And so, this is kind of what came to mind when I thought about the people that he's preaching to in the book of Hebrews. This group of people in Hebrews, they're very weary. They're tired. They seem like they're wanting to give up. They're wandering. They're distracted by various things. They're very downtrodden. You see, what's happening to this people in the book of Hebrews is they're experiencing this clash of having faith in Jesus, having put their trust and hope in Jesus, but yet still living in a broken world. And they live in a very broken economical and political system. They're experiencing persecution. But the brokenness isn't just without, but the brokenness is also within us, right? And so they're experiencing this clash of what they thought their faith in Jesus should look like, but having to live in a broken world at the same time. And they're starting to ask themselves, is it worth it? That's why we've titled this portion of the sermon series, Life Worth Living. But they're asking themselves, is it worth it? And so, just a question like, can we relate to this? Being weary and wandering, distracted, downtrodden, struggling to find joy, feeling unsafe, finding ourselves sarcastic and cynical, not trusting other people. We experience the same thing. But we just read at the end of chapter 12, it says this in verse 28, "Therefore let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken." So yes, we are living in a broken world, brokenness without, brokenness within. There's a real enemy out there that doesn't want you to experience life in Jesus, but yet we have a faith in Jesus that gives us a citizenship in a kingdom that cannot be taken away from us. It can't be shaken. So how, and this is the question we're answering this morning, is how can we be grateful and not become like the Bergens and Branch? How can we live this life of faith in this unshakable kingdom? Well, in the passage that was read for us, we get the answer to that in verse 1, when it says, "Let brotherly love continue." Keep loving one another. The way I would say it is, do not cease to love one another as family. So the main idea this morning is this: as citizens, like I'm speaking to you, if you've put your hope and trust in Jesus, I'm speaking to you. And I hope this morning it's really particular to us here at Sojourn. But as citizens of an unshakable kingdom living in a broken world, we, the church, must be, we have to be, devoted to loving each other. This passage invites us to two imperatives to what it means to be devoted to loving one another. First is that we need to be a people of present affection. And secondly, we need to be a people with focused affection. The first way we continue to love one another is to be a people of present affection. So present affection, it's kind of a cyclical thing. First, when I talk about present affection, I mean our affection should invite others to be present with us, which from this passage we call hospitality, inviting others to be present with us. And the second is that we should pursue to be present with other people, which we would call being a healing presence. Being a people of present affection for one another, it requires, and this might be the only time I say this, but it's important. It requires that we have a diligent mindfulness of other people that leads us to action, to caring for them. Verses 2 and 3 give us the framework for what this looks like. Verse 2 says, "Do not neglect to show hospitality to strangers, for thereby some have entertained angels unawares." The word strangers here, it's not simply referring to people who don't know Jesus. The word strangers here means someone you don't know, someone not like you. It could be that neighbor you see walking their dog. It could be your coworker that works down the hall. It could be the person that you see on the street. Or it could be the person who sits 2 rows in front of you every Sunday that you've never met. So verse 2, it beckons us to be mindful and thoughtful to people you don't know. One more thing that I'll say about this passage, I'll say a lot more about this passage, but this verse is, it says that by being hospitable to strangers, some people have entertained angels and they didn't know it. I don't have time to go into all that because honestly, I don't really know what he means by that. But he is referring back to the Old Testament, where some people in the Old Testament were very kind and generous to strangers, and they had no idea that they were angels, which I think is pretty cool. Now, here's the thing. I don't have the discernment to know whether this person is an angel or not. We don't have angel vision, right? But here's what I can say, is that whoever that stranger is that you're sitting across from, you might not know whether they're an angel, but they are an image bearer of God. No matter where they come from or their story, no matter the color of their skin or their ethnicity or their political affiliation, they are an image bearer of God, just like you. And so, seeking to be hospitable to strangers, I would define hospitality, and this is, while a lot of ideas about hospitality come to mind, as Christians, here's how I define hospitality, is our affection inviting other people to be present with us. Now, notice I did not say inviting other people into your presence, okay? You see the difference there? It's not like, come into my kingdom and look at my beautiful home. That's inviting someone into your presence. I'm saying invite them to be present with you. It's more than just inviting someone into your home or to sit at your kitchen table. This hospitality is inviting them to come into your life and be present with you, to be near you, to be known by you. One of my favorite authors, he was a pastor, preacher, and they used to open up their home to people and have these big meals. And after the meal was over, he would jet off to the kitchen. And I read this in his biography. Kind of sad. But he would jet off to the kitchen, and he would start cleaning up and doing the dishes. And you're like, oh man, he's sweet. He's loving his wife. That's not why he did it. He jetted off to the kitchen because he didn't want to be around the people in his home. He just didn't want to, he didn't want small talk or to chat with them. Look, that's not hospitality. Your food might be delicious and your couch might be comfortable, but can they be present with you? Can they be themselves and feel like you want to get to know them? Another way of asking it is, when they leave, will they still feel like a stranger? The times where I have experienced godly hospitality, I probably can't tell you what I ate, or let alone whether it was delicious or not. I can't tell you whether the couch was leather or cloth or comfortable. But I know that when I was there, I felt safe. I felt safe to be who I was, with my emotions, with my story. When I left, I know that I felt more known than when I had arrived. I felt joy. When I left, it wasn't just my stomach that was full, but my heart was full. When I leave godly hospitality, I feel like I have experienced a small taste of the unshakable kingdom. You see, we are people of hospitality because we serve a God of hospitality. God is never going to call you to be something that he has not already been for you. Hebrews 4:16 Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace. Hebrews 10:19. Therefore, brothers, since we have confidence to enter the holy places by the blood of Jesus. You see, the throne of grace and the holy place, that's where the presence of God lived. Now, to sinners and rebels like you and me, left to ourselves, the presence of God should be the most terrifying and unsafe place for us to be. But because of what Jesus did, and has invited us to be present with him, the most unsafe and terrifying place that you and I could be has now become the safest place for us to be, where we can be most known, where we are most welcome, and we can come just as we are. So we, like Jesus, invite others to be present with us. But also we need to seek to be present with other people, which here we'll refer to as being a healing presence. So this is not inviting people to be present with you, but this is you going and being present with other people. In verse 3, it says this: remember those who are in prison as though in prison with them, and those who are mistreated, since you also are in the body. It is important to note that the people here are not strangers, but they are in prison and being mistreated because of their faith in Jesus. These are Christians that these people would have known. We might not experience that kind of persecution here in America. No one knows someone at the Floyd County Jail who's there because of their faith in Jesus. But I don't think this passage is inviting us to start a prison ministry or a mercy ministry. While those things are good, this passage is inviting us to be mindful of people who are hurting and alone. Because we all know people who are hurting and alone, probably in this room right now. This is not just, it doesn't just say remember those in prison, but what? Remember as though you yourself are in prison. Don't just remember those being mistreated, but remember them as though you're hurting as well, because you're a part of the body. Because we know what hurting and feeling alone feels like, we are compelled to go and be a healing presence in the midst of people's pain and loneliness. Think about it this way. Remember the last time that a loved one died in your life. The pain and the loss that you're going through. You might not remember what was said at the eulogy or what songs were sang, but I'll bet you remember who was there for you. I'll bet you remember who drew near to you in the midst of the loss. You might not remember those people everyone who showed up, but I bet you remember the people who stayed. I'm going to try to... Sorry. Y'all know what it feels like, right? I don't know why I always cry when I preach, but I just was thinking about the last time I experienced this in my life. I experience it a lot, I think, but the last time I was hurting. I was hurting. It was a relational hurt. Some pain had been caused, and probably shouldn't share this story because I don't know if I'll get through it. Yeah, we'll be here till 11 o'clock, I guess. But I was back there, and I was talking to someone, being vulnerable, and I said, and I just got choked up. Like, I got overwhelmed with emotion, and I just, it was kind of an awkward social moment. I said, excuse me. And I just jetted back to the Connect room back there. And there's like some black curtains back there. I was by myself because I just needed a minute. But what I didn't know is that on my way back there, a friend saw me. And came back there to be with me. And I was pretty similar to how I feel right now. I just started weeping. And it was like a big burly bear hug with tears, you know. And all he said to me was, "I'm sorry, man," because he knew what I was going through. You see, that's being a healing presence to someone. That took me a lot longer to get through. But you see the point? He saw me in pain. He saw my hurt. And he went to me. He came to me. And he didn't give me like a biblical Band-Aid and quote scripture over me. But just him being present with me was like a soothing balm for my soul. You see, God, again, is never going to ask you to be something that he's not been for you. And we're told throughout the book of Hebrews, this is exactly what Jesus has already done for you. Jesus left his throne and he came into your world, into your brokenness and your pain. Jesus is the one who sympathizes with you in your temptation and your need. Remember, Jesus draws near to you and he's present with you. Hebrews 4:16 says this, and I'll read the whole verse this time. Let us then with confidence draw near to the throne of grace, that we may receive mercy and find grace to help in time of need. When we come to Jesus, we not only just come into Jesus' presence, but it says that Jesus is also present with us. When we come before Jesus, it doesn't say that Jesus fixes all of your problems, or that Jesus says all the right words, or that Jesus tells you all the places in your life that you need to work on. No, but it says that Jesus steps into your need with you, and he gives you mercy, and he gives you grace. Being present with someone in the midst of their hurt and pain does not mean that you try to fix their problems. And it doesn't mean that you have to say the perfect thing or know the perfect verse. But can we simply be people who know how to draw near to one another, to sit with one another, to cry with one another, and to pray over one another? Lastly, I'll say this, and this hopefully sums this point up. Jesus' ministry to you is not a distant virtual ministry. Jesus' ministry to you is a in-your-face, get close, draw near, in-person, lifelong marathon ministry. So why should we expect that our ministry to one another as the church should be any different than that? May this church be a people with love for one another that is displayed through present affection, inviting one another into our hospitality and being a healing presence. But the second way that we can continue to love one another is to be a people of focused affection. Now, it's important to understand that present affection and focused affection, they're not mutually exclusive. These two things have to go together. It says in verses 4 and 5, it says, let marriage be held in honor among all, and let the marriage bed be undefiled. For God will judge the sexually immoral and adulterous. Keep your life free from the love of money and be content with what you have. It seems like the preacher has changed subjects, and he's no longer talking about healing and hospitality, but he's now talking about marriage and money, or greed and adultery. But the subject is still loving each other. If verses 2 and 3 describe behaviors that are encouraged for loving each other, then verses 4 and 5 describe behaviors that are not only forbidden to love one another, but are also destructive to loving each other. Verses 2 and 3 show us how we are to have affection for one another, while verses 4 and 5 remind us that our affection for each other can lose its focus. So, when the marriage bed is defiled through adultery, that is affection given where it should not go. It is love being misplaced. It is affection being given to the wrong person. In the same way, love for money, love for things and possessions and success, that is us placing our affection in things that it should not be placed. The point here is not about adultery or greed, but rather it shows us a reality of affection, and that is affection is like water. It cannot be stopped. So, if it rains real hard and your gutters fill up with water because it's clogged at the end, it's not like the water says to itself, well, I have nowhere to go, so I'll just stop. No, it drips over the gutter, right? It has to go somewhere. Affection is the same thing. Affection cannot be stopped. It simply has to be rerouted. So the question is, how can we be a people of present affection if we have lost focus of our affection for each other? But I want to point something out that I think is amazing about this passage. You would think that the preacher here would, talking about adultery and greed, you think he would quote from the book of Proverbs, one of those terrifying verses about what it means to be greedy or being unfaithful to your spouse. You know what I'm talking about? You think that's what he would quote. But how does he address affection that's lost its focus? He quotes from Joshua and from the Psalms when he says, "For God said, I will never leave nor forsake you." And then he goes on to say, "The Lord is my helper. I will not fear. What can man do to me?" You see, the issue is not who or what is receiving your misplaced affection. That's not the point here. The preacher is addressing why our affection loses its focus in the first place. It appears the audience of Hebrews, they feel like they've been abandoned. They feel unsafe. They've experienced some pain and some hurt and loss. By quoting these verses, the preacher is speaking to their fear, to their hurt, and to their loneliness. It is not what you see above the water that causes you to lose the focus of your affection, but it is the iceberg below the surface that drives us to lose focus of our affection. So here's an easy way to think about it. No one stands at the altar on their wedding day staring into their spouse's face saying, "I do," while in the back of their mind they're thinking, "I can't wait to cheat on you." No one gets their first paycheck, and after getting over the shock that Social Security and FICA are real things, no one ever looks at that paycheck and says, "Man, I can't wait to be greedy now." It starts way before that. Have you ever thought that your affections are misplaced because you have wounds that need to be healed? or you have places in your life that you don't feel safe. And because of that, you're taking your affection and you're putting it in the wrong things, and you're putting it in the wrong people, because you think that putting it that thing or that person is going to bring the healing, is going to bring the safety, and is going to bring the love that we can only find in God himself. We talked about Branch at the beginning of the service, the troll, and how he had some trauma from his past, and it had caused him to kind of become what he had become. Our affections in our life, we lose focus of the right things because more than likely we haven't dealt with hurt and loneliness in our own life. This might be where you need to sit today. The invitation for you might not be to find out all the ways that you can be hospitable and healing to others, but maybe you need to take a minute and think about where you need healing in your own life, or why you struggle to trust or you don't feel safe. If I say go be hospitable to people and go be a healing presence, if that makes you clam up a little bit, if that makes you a little bit scared, then maybe you need to ask why. And it could be because there's stuff in your life that you haven't dealt with. Because I can tell you that it's hard to draw near to other people and be a healing presence when you have not allowed yourself to be healed. It's equally as difficult to allow others to draw near to you in hospitality when you don't feel safe and you don't trust other people. You see, it's nearly impossible to be a present affection when we don't have focused affection. But again, the Lord is never going to ask you or call you to be something that He has not been to you already. It says that God will never leave or forsake you. How can we be a people of focused affection? Because Jesus never lost focus of you. His affections never wavered in his pursuit of you. This is the major theme throughout the book of Hebrews, that Jesus fixed his eyes on you. Jesus drew near to you. Jesus gives you a place where you can be safe, where you can be heard, where you can be known, and where you can be healed. So we too can fix our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. And listen, allowing Jesus to heal you and experiencing this kind of affection, I don't think you can get that by going and locking yourself in your room and just saying, oh, Jesus changed me, Jesus healed me. The greatest way that you can experience healing and hospitality in this world is not by locking yourself in your room, but it's by being around God's people. If we are being, listen, it's simple. If we are being a people of present affection for those around us, then those who are hurting can be healed, and those who are lonely can find community, and those who are struggling to trust other people can begin to trust other people. We have to be this for one another. So, what if the church fixed our eyes on Jesus and we lived in gratitude as citizens of an unshakable kingdom? What if we loved one another with present affection and focused affection? What would happen? It's not like if we do this, it's going to produce I still got the trolls in my mind, like peppy, bright, colorful, cheery, spirit finger-filled, people who live life with smiles on their faces all the time and they pretend like nothing is wrong. Like, that's not what happens if we can be this for one another. If we can be a people of present affection and focused affection and be devoted to loving one another, here's what will happen. It will give you the strength to carry on. And isn't that what we need? I just need the strength to get through today. It will produce people of Hebrews 12:1 where we can throw off all the things that slow us down, and we can unravel the sin that trips us up, and we can run with perseverance the race that is marked out for us. It will help us be a people. Jonah talked about this last week, that it doesn't mean that we're not going to have a limp in life. If we can be this for one another, it doesn't mean that we're not going to run with a limp. But what it does mean is that we can still run. We can still have the strength to carry on. I'll just read verse 7 to you. It says, "Remember your leaders, those who spoke to you the word of God. Consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith." I don't necessarily think this is saying, hey, remember your pastors and do exactly what your pastors do. I don't know if it's saying that. When it says consider the outcome of their way of life and imitate their faith, I think he's calling these people to remember the leaders who have already finished their race, the leaders who have already gone on before them. They finished their race, and they had strength till the end. I think we all need to be honest and say that most days, when it comes to our faith in Jesus, we ask ourselves, is it worth it? We need the strength to carry on, friends. And so I'll say it like this. If I want to laugh, I'll watch a comedy on TV. If I want to cry, I'll watch a sad or inspiring video. If I want to be scared, I'll watch a scary movie, or I'll just turn on the news. But if I want to be encouraged and strengthened, to feel safe, to experience peace, I can't get that from Netflix. And my bank account will never be able to give that to me. I need you, and you need me. We need each other. I'm speaking to Sojourn. If you want to have the strength to carry on, you need each other. Be devoted to keep loving one another. Be hospitable. Be healing. And remain focused. Because this world is hard, and there's a real enemy. But may we have the strength to carry on. If you're able and willing, please stand with me.